Bonjour ciao and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now this video is going to be my last review of my terms as a first year student, and that's honestly so weird to say. Like, it's the end of my first year ish. Like, I still have exams in October, but all of the essays, all the tutorials, all the lectures, all the practicals are now done. But this term in particular was quite unique because this term essentially was just all done remotely, and that meant that I was stuck at home doing medicine stuff, I guess. So in this video I'm just going to break down what sort of things I did, how I felt about this term, and sort of just giving you guys a bit more insight into what things were like. I know this is quite distinct and unique, and I'm not sure if this kind of video will occur again in the future, because hopefully lockdown will sort of end and we won't necessarily have to like deal with remote learning in the future. But just for like a one-off, this is just my review of my last term as a first year student. Now before I get into it, it's 30 degrees right now. It is really hot, and I am currently sweating. Like, it's unbelievably hot, so from time to time you may see me like trying to fan myself or like wipe away sweat because it's so hot right now. But hopefully that doesn't, you know, interfere too much, and you can just still watch in and, you know, listen to how I found my last term as a fresher. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tolu, and I am technically still a first year medical student at the University of Oxford, and our terms are about 8 weeks long. So they're short, they're intense, and even within those terms we get so much work done. This term especially. I think because we were at home and we couldn't necessarily have the usual practicals that we do, they had to give us a lot of work to be able to compensate for us. So usually in a normal term we'd have weekly practicals based off of histology, so that's looking at cells under a microscope, where we'd analyze like a muscle cell or a neuron or all sorts of cells, and we'd take the time to like look over, answer some questions, and that maybe take up maybe one practical a week. We'd also have something called the demonstration room practicals, which is where we look at cadavers, which are real life bodies, to help us, you know, develop our understanding of different parts of the body. And again, because we were at home, we didn't necessarily have access to that. So all of those practicals that we have now missed out on, we had to have lectures instead. So in terms of having, you know, something in front of you to learn, we didn't necessarily have that, and I felt like that was something that we missed out on a lot, because I gained quite a bit from having real life practicals. Because for me, when it comes to learning, I'm sort of a visual / auditory learner, so having something in front of me to physically see would help me with my understanding a lot better. But because of this term and being at home, I didn't necessarily have that, so I personally found it quite difficult trying to kind of like find my bearings when it came to more practically topics. So instead of our usual practicals, like I said, we had lectures instead, where, for example, with histology, we'll have some histological slides put in front of us on our screen. We'd have someone talking over the slides, etc. But sometimes it's just nicer to be able to sort of navigate the microscope and look at these aspects yourself. So like trying to find some red blood cells, trying to find the membrane yourself. It's just personally better to help develop my understanding. But again, that's what we missed out on, so it's a shame. But again, we just had to use the resources that we currently had, which was just further lectures. In terms of the demonstration room practicals, those sessions would usually be about 2 hours, and it'd be split in half. So we'd have one section where we covered living anatomy, which is where we would like just do some anatomy on ourselves. So we'd palpate ourselves, we'll find different joints and bones and do things that didn't require using a cadaver. And then another part of it would actually be using or looking at a real life body. So instead of that, we again had lectures where someone will talk us through these different features, and again, having someone just tell you where those things are instead of having to like look at it yourself, there's a major difference with how you can sort of absorb that level of knowledge. And again, I feel like I had missed out on what would have been a nice way to sort of enhance my understanding of anatomy, because anatomy is really hard. It's something that you just have to try and find as many resources as possible to allow you to see something visually for yourself, because You can like know what different parts are, but if you don't see it for yourself, it's kind of difficult to try and connect the dots. So for me especially, I know in my first term I found it quite difficult trying to remember things like the different parts of, let's say, the clavicle or our scapula, but having seen one in real life, I could then properly envision where all of those different pieces were, and that definitely helped with my understanding. And that's why I have like all these posters in my room all the time, because I just like looking at them and using it to help, you know, develop my understanding and ensure that I understand what those things actually are. So instead of a practicals for DR, we had lectures, and those lectures, oh my gosh, they were like 2.5 hours long, and I don't have a long attention span, so having to sit to just watch someone talk at you about anatomy, it just wasn't, I just personally didn't like it at all. The presentations themselves were really good. They were very detailed, and I really appreciated that, but the problem with it was because it was so much information being given to us in 2 hours that we had to sit through it, I just felt so impatient and so stressed because it was just so much given to us at in one go. I eventually managed to get through all of those lectures, but either way it was just a lot, and it was really intense. And I think being at home made it a lot worse, because usually at uni you'd have a really long day filled with lectures and practicals, and you'd have a lot of work to do, but then usually afterwards you could treat yourself by going out for dinner with your friends, by going to a formal in your college, meeting up with people, going clubbing afterwards essentially. But because we were stuck at home during lockdown, I didn't have any of that, so it was literally just me spending all of my day working, and the only thing I could really do to treat myself was to watch something on Netflix or FaceTime my friends, and like those were still nice, but it just wasn't necessarily the same soothing feeling that I would have otherwise received if I could actually physically see my friends or physically go out and experience and do all of these different things. So it's a shame that this was something that we missed out on this term, because apparently summer term is meant to be the best term, but as a fresher we were robbed of that experience, unfortunately, and we didn't necessarily experience what a great summer term would have entailed. But continuing on, in terms of lectures, we had been given a timetable that we had to watch through, and I think I had to sort of distribute which days of the week I'd spend watching which lectures. So each lecture usually would be about 40 minutes long on a particular topic. So we have 3 topics: organisation of the body, which is based off of anatomy; physiology and pharmacology, which is based off of like drugs and how different parts of the body work; and biochemistry and medical genetics, so stuff to do with metabolism and then genetics, etc. And I had to find a way to watch enough lectures within the week so that I wouldn't need to have to rush and catch up later on. However, it got to the point where some weeks would have, let's say, 6 lectures and 4 practicals, or 8 lectures and 3 practicals, or 3 lectures and then 6 practicals, and it was just a lot, because we having to like sit through all of those lectures and making notes during those lectures at the same time is quite a lot. It was something that I wasn't particularly used to, because whenever we had lectures we'd usually be given a handout of the lecture slides that we can look through and make notes around as well. But because I don't necessarily have the facilities at home to have to print out hundreds of lectures to make notes on, I instead had to find an alternative, got some A4 paper and just had to scribble down notes as I went along. I felt like for me doing it that way it was okay and I was able to absorb information better, but it just meant it took me so much longer to get through the lectures, because I'd have to continuously pause and then write down something I saw on the screen that I thought would be really useful, and then go back to it and then pause and go back to it and pause, and so on. And again, that was so convoluted and it was just so long, and it just made the time that I took watching lectures and going through practicals so much longer than it needed to be. And again, it was just stressful and it was just but I eventually got through it, which is great, but again wasn't necessarily ideal. Other than the lectures and the practicals, which is what would usually occur in a usual term as well, we also had tutorials. Oh my gosh, this term was jam-packed with work, and yikes. Okay, so one of the things that makes Oxford particularly unique is the tutorial system. So for those of you who don't know what the tutorial system is, it is essentially a mini discussion that you'd have with someone who's particularly, you know, high in their field. So you'd have one-on-one conversations, not even one-on-one, three-on-one or small group-on-one conversations with a tutor who'd go into a bit more detail about a particular topic within your syllabus. So in my college, Keble College, we have quite a few tutors, so they specialise in a range of subjects. So we've got tutors who specialise in cardiovascular, in the cardiovascular system, tutors who specialise in biochemistry and genetics, etc. And we'd have tutorials with those individual tutors so we can enhance our learning and potentially delve a bit deeper into those topics that we would have otherwise not have gone into that much detail in our lectures, which is a really, really great thing to have, because you learn so much more about that topic than you would have otherwise done in your lecture, and then you can apply it whenever you have exams or just when you want to write further detailed notes in the future anyway. The thing is with tutorials, and this term especially, is whenever we have tutorials, we usually will also be set an essay based on the topic that we will be covering in that tutorial. So alongside lectures to go through, practicals to go through, and also write up practicals and do experiments for those practicals at home, so like calculations and stuff. Alongside those two, we'd have tutorials and then also essays for those tutorials, which was, it was great. And sometimes we'd get 2 essays set in a week. And although it may not sound like much, when it comes to writing essays, there are particular criteria that need to be met when you write those essays. So this includes having a general grasp of the topic and explaining it, trying to find clinical relevance, because I study medicine, it's important to have clinical relevance, so finding diseases that are in relation to this topic, maybe surgical techniques and stuff, and then also experimental findings. Now, when it comes to researching all of these topics, it takes a long time. So usually my system is I would usually spend about a portion of the day making my plan for the essay. So I'd make notes on the general overview of that topic so that I knew what to write about. I'd find diagrams and pictures that I'd draw out. I'd try and draw out some of the diagrams and graphs myself. I'd research different experiments and look at their findings and try and find the summary of that particular experiment and see how it correlates with the essay title I've been given. And then I try and find clinical relevance and see, oh, okay, so this disease can also come if this goes wrong, or this disease is associated with this thing, and so on. And then I'd make the plan and I'd just sort it out for that day, and then I usually would spend the next day writing it all up. Now, a typical essay would be about, let's say, maybe just under 2,000 words, so that's about 4 pages, and it's a lot. It is a lot, and I'm not gonna lie about that, but I think over time you get used to it. So for me now, the quality of my essays from the start of uni to now has definitely improved. But it still takes quite a lot of time to try and go through all of those things in detail, and I found that in combination with everything as well, it just made it so much more overwhelming and so much more harder. Eventually I did get through a lot of the essays, in fact most of the essays, but it still contributed to a lot of work and a lot of stress that I felt this term especially. So I think this term, let me count, I did at least 8 essays this term. And I'm proud of the quality of the essays that I produced. My tutors made improvements where I needed them to be, but overall I'm quite happy with the essays that I produce, because those essays I can also use for revision in the future. And yeah, it was great, but again, the combination of all of that work was just very intense, and I definitely found at times that I'd stress out and potentially have some breakdowns because it was just so overwhelming at times. But I think I kind of helped myself by planning what I wanted to do in advance, so that I kind of knew what was expected from me. And I think one thing that's really good that I did as well is I tried to keep my weekends free, because I didn't want to have to spend the entire week just working, because then that wouldn't give myself enough time to rest. So instead I would try and leave my weekends free, so that if anything did go wrong earlier that week, I could maybe use my Saturday to try and catch up with something. But I knew that for me, regardless of whatever happened, my Sundays would always be free. Like, Sunday is my rest day, so I made sure to like make sure no work at all would be done on Sundays, because I needed that day. I needed at least one day to properly completely rest, and I really found it beneficial for myself this term in particular. So that was lectures, practicals, tutorials and everything, which was great. So again, the intensity of the work was very interesting. But I think alongside that as well, trying to connect with my friends, I really appreciated, because I knew that since everyone else was at home, I could potentially talk to friends from like my old school that I hadn't really spoken to as much as I would have done during uni, because it would have been really intense anyway. So it was nice to have sometimes the odd pub quiz night, to have some Zoom calls with my friends, watching stuff with each other, and I found that really nice. It allowed me to sort of sit back, relax and enjoy time with my friends. So I guess because I at least had that, I was okay. One thing that I found during this time especially is being stuck at home really knocked my motivation and my self-esteem at times. So I knew that to benefit like my health and my well-being, it would be great to go on the odd walk, or to just go outside from time to time. But I think being so overwhelmed by work all the time and being isolated at home, I just didn't have the strength or the motivation to want to even leave my house. So then again, that sort of made matters worse for me. But I think eventually over time I kind of pushed myself more to go outside, or at least like had my blinds open and my window wide open, so I could at least still get some fresh air. But I think being stuck at home all the time just didn't really help when it came to the work as well, because I didn't really have much to do at home. I just didn't feel like going on walking. But I feel like now, after my term is over, because I don't have the burden of work, I can, you know, treat myself better. I'm now going jogging more often. So I think just the whole build up of work really influenced my mental health and my well-being. But I think looking back on it now, I did what I could do in that time to make myself feel better. So at least I had done that, which was good. The next thing that I want to talk about in particular is what was going on in the world during my last term as a fresher. Hopefully, as you're all aware of, at the end of May, George Floyd was murdered by police in America, and that sparked outrage across the world, and it was a time that was very much stressful for a lot of black people, and a lot of my black friends especially. Now, when it comes to just life in general, a lot of black people will face potential microaggressions and racism throughout their entire lives, and that's not a shock, that's not something new. It's been an occurrence for potentially centuries, and it's something that we have all been aware of. But I think this particular case of police brutality and racism definitely shook the world, and it led to more and more people being conscious of the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as the oppression and the discrimination that a lot of black people face in the world. I mean, it's always happened, and black people especially will know of it, but I feel like more non-black people were made aware of it and more conscious of the brutality and the oppression and the discrimination that a lot of black people face in their lives. For me personally, I've been victim of microaggressions. I've been called racial slurs. I haven't necessarily experienced overt racism in a way, but I have suffered from ignorant actions and just offensive things. So in a way, I'm lucky that I haven't experienced certain things that people have in their lives, but then again, that still doesn't justify that it's acceptable. So the death of George Floyd and the death of Ahmaud Arbery, the death of Breonna Taylor, the death of Elijah McClain, the death of so many people just highlighted the need to try and combat systematic or systemic racism, oppression, discrimination, and just racism in general. Now, as someone with a platform, like with my YouTube channel and my Instagram account and my Twitter account, etc., I felt like it was necessary for me to use that platform to try and educate my followers and my subscribers, and to give insight into what it's like to live as a black person nowadays. Of course, it was my choice to do all of those things because it's best to hear from an actual black person about their experiences than it is to hear from a white person talking about a black person's experience, because it's not they don't necessarily go through the things that we do. So I felt like it was necessary for me to use my voice to try and educate people on a lot of these matters. However, constantly having to come in contact with ignorant people who would go under my videos or tell me that all lives matter, or that racism doesn't exist, or I don't see colour, like phrases like that, they accumulated and eventually contributed to like a downfall in my mental health / well-being per se, because I can't outwardly talk about my experiences as a black person if someone's just going to shoot it down and say that it's not true. So that occurred, I think, about maybe in week 4, week 5 of term, and that honestly, in terms of my motivation to do work, made things a lot more difficult. So for example, I did some like Instagram lives with Eve Bennett on the StudyTube project channel, where I answered questions about different aspects of racism, etc., using the knowledge that I personally had and speaking about it from my own experience. I made my video about why it's no longer enough to be neutral, etc., talking about different things, using my Instagram stories to bring attention to particular injustices of the world, making sure that people had access to petitions, donations, etc. And although doing all of those things definitely helped like show people what they should be doing or what they could be doing to support the Black Lives Matter movement, at the same time it was very, very tiring and draining for me to have to go through all of those things, because it's not compulsory that a black person must tell you about their experiences in life, or that they have to take the time to educate you on all of these matters, because Google exists, books exist, do your own research. You don't have to expect a person of colour or a black colour to have to delve into emotional trauma essentially to teach you about how to not be racist and how to not be ignorant, etc. But obviously people will take you for granted with all of those things, and that definitely, you know, it just took a toll on me over time. And it got to the point where I think around week 5, week 6, that I had just personally lost the motivation to like sit through lectures and watch them properly and make notes on them. So I had to ask like my friends, my medic friends in my college, to see if they could like hand me some notes, etc., so that I could still at least do something. I spoke to my tutors saying that, okay, I may not necessarily be able to submit this thing because my head's just not in the right place right now. And I think one thing that I really appreciate is that, one, the medics, 2, the tutors, and the people that I spoke to in general were very much understanding about my mental health and my needs, and I really appreciated that. However, I'd also have to come across certain people who just made matters difficult for me. I mean, I enjoyed receiving the nice comments from my friends being like, Tolu, well done for this. I really appreciated you teaching me. I appreciate you spending the time out of your day to like go through all of these topics, and I really appreciated that. But that was essentially like the bare minimum. Like, I don't necessarily have to spend all of my time going through all of these topics with people when they can do the research themselves. But then I also, as a result, through me doing these things to help others, I received a lot of hateful comments and just unnecessary attacks. And yeah, it was just very difficult. It was really hard. So in terms of that, for me this term, that definitely knocked my self-esteem and my motivation throughout like the later half of term. I made some of my tutors aware of this, and I guess, I don't know, it just made things a lot more difficult, I guess. But yeah, I don't really know what more to say about that, other than it really just took a toll on my mental health. but I don't want to continue delving into that because it is still very draining for me to discuss. But instead, one thing that I am very pleased about and happy with is that this term for the ACS, which I adore, it's a society that is basically for students of Afro and Caribbean heritage, and it's just a really nice society to be around because it allows me to be surrounded by people like me. So this term I ran for the role of PR officer with the ACS, and I got the role. So hopefully next year, or not even hopefully, next year I will be taking up that role and, you know, being in control of the social media platforms, helping people be more engaged who wouldn't necessarily be in Oxford, etc. And I just really can't wait because social media stuff is my thing. So it'll be nice to kind of take that on board again and, you know, contribute to the ACS and like use that position as a sort of thank you for the things that they helped me do within first year, because they had been so supportive, and it was just really nice being surrounded by other, you know, people of colour, because Oxford isn't that diverse. I know they like to hide behind the term BAME, so I think the new statistics now said that a fifth of Oxford students who received an offer were of a BAME background, and that's great, that's fantastic. However, what is the actual proportion of the black students or the Asian students or the minority ethnic students? Like, sure, 20% of the students are BAME, but only 3% of them are black. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. That was also one thing that I'm really proud of. Again, I'm just proud of getting through term in general. Like, there was so much that we had to do. Like this week, like a few days ago, we had an assignment set. We had to write 2 essays, and I finished that, and I'm really proud that I did that. And I think now all I have left is to revise and prepare for my exams in October, because they got shifted to October. And I think over summer I'm just gonna like finalize my notes and make sure that that's all prepared and ready for, but then also enjoy my summer and chill, because I've got through first year. Like, I've actually got through my first year of Oxford as a medical student from a black background, bro. Oh, that is great. I guess I will leave it here for now, but thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for your support over this year as well, because my channel has like grown significantly in the time that I started uni to now. So hopefully I will be able to produce more content, and yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.